I have been thinking about ReZero almost constantly since it first aired 4 years ago, so it's unsurprising that I spent the back half of last year similarly obsessed with its second season, especially since that left us eagerly awaiting its own delayed back half, which just kicked off, almost like I planned that or something. There are still many mysteries left to be solved, deadly threats yet unresolved, several enigmatic, charismatic villains remain at large, and those goddamn rabbits, man. And we can be assured that the series will present those big battles and dramatic world-turning moments with Sakuga-tastic aplomb, as it has to this point. But out of all of that fantastical stuff, the thing that stuck with me the hardest in the 3-month gap between episodes is perhaps the most mundane, some might say boring part of the whole season. Episode 4, wherein Subaru and his parents do nothing but stand and sit and walk around talking about their feelings for a solid half hour. Still, as anyone who's familiar with this series can tell you, that's not particularly surprising either. The best episode of last season, From Zero, was also pure conversation. A reckoning between Subaru and Rem, his hikikomori urge to give up, pitted against her unwavering faith in her hero. In many ways, parent and child can be viewed as a continuation of that conversation. Subaru even reminisces about a few of its most character-defining, emotionally impactful lines.
It's easy to give up, but doing so doesn't suit you. Let's start here, from square one. No, from zero. My hero, he's the greatest in the world.
Which is precisely the revelation that empowered Subaru to overcome this trial from his past before it even restarted. Subaru already grappled with his old hikikomori ways after Emilia rebuked him, and he was rendered incapable of doing anything by the exhausting strain and guilt of accomplishing nothing. But Rem helped him see that nothing, zero, is but a starting point from which anything is possible. So he's past this. The test of going to school isn't a test for this Subaru at all. It's simply a measuring stick, showing us how far he's come since the series began. But that doesn't mean this episode falls short in challenging our hero, or in exploring new facets of his character, because that emotionally charged callback is also an excellent way of priming viewers for the emotional gut punches of parent and child's back half, where light slice-of-life comedy gives way to the heavy, bittersweet tragedy inherent to the isekai premise. Subaru is trapped in another world, so this magically induced guilt nightmare might be the last time he ever gets to see or talk to his parents. Time and again, the episode's direction reminds us of this, framing their interactions as distant and hazy. The shot of Subaru's tears blurring and distorting his father's face is a bit on the nose, but nonetheless absolutely devastating. They are already far beyond his reach. This is just a film-grainy, chromatically aberrant memory. But at least it gives Subaru a chance to say goodbye and leave them with his best assurance that they raised him right, that he'll be okay. Which in the short term, he definitely will not. Have you seen this show? Though with a clearer picture of who he is and where he came from, a happy ending for Subaru is a distant yet increasingly distinct possibility. That is, if he can move up the measuring stick, past not hating himself to actually loving himself. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because this episode has a lot more to say about his past struggles and the present danger surrounding him. Not to mention Subaru's own character before this journey began, which was one of the series' biggest looming questions up to this point. ReZero tells us very little about who Subaru is at its outset, beyond the absolute basics. He likes manga enough to cynically second-guess its writing, he's excruciatingly single, and he's as excited to start life in a parallel fantasy world as he is unprepared for it. Besides that unprepared part, this is all par for the course with modern escapist light novel isekai, which knows nerds want to get to the fun fantasy stuff as fast as possible and prefer reading about/watching heroes they can relate to. Many of these shows and books never bother to go back and fill in those blanks because that's space onto which the audience is meant to project. But in good isekai, like Escaflowne, brief return trips to the ordinary world which allow the hero to reconcile who they were with who they've become are a common key component of the greater journey. Typically, these moments are framed as trials of temptation. The hero is offered a chance to give up on their quest, abandon their otherworldly allies, and take a shortcut back to their initial goal of normalcy. Normal wasn't good for Subaru, though. He doesn't want his old life back, despite its many upsides and the many hardships he faces in this new one. And either way, he can't get it back. So there's nothing to tempt him with, and his arc can only go in the opposite direction, learning to appreciate the family he left behind in tandem with the comrades he has now. And there's a lot to appreciate. You'd expect, given Subaru's initial disposition, that his home life would be unhappy, but his parents are great. Too great, even. Kenichi, his dad, is the very definition of a Chad, and his mom, Naoko, while a bit spacey, is sweet, surprisingly perceptive, and hilarious. Also hot, but this is a good anime, so that's not relevant to her son. Both of them love Subaru unconditionally and want to help him through his shut-in phase, but they both also recognize that it's something he ultimately needs to work through on his own. Kenichi tries to offer encouragement in his own way, keeping his son physically active, talking to him about girls, and generally trying to make him feel as normal and accepted as possible. Naoko goes the abnormal route, trying to convey cryptic messages through abstract metaphors like a mountain of peas, a challenge that Subaru could handle if he put his mind to it, while his dad never could, or something. But she also has a much more comprehensive understanding of the underlying problem here, possibly because Kenichi was too humble and too close to it to see Subaru struggling to emulate him. But more than that, it's because she's just an observant, compassionate person, weird as her ways of expressing it might be. And in addition to those evil-looking eyes, Subaru inherited that from her. The same way he forms a wordless connection with Rem just by patting her hair, Naoko comforts him by tussling his. And he too is often a little overwilling to overshare what's on his mind. Our brief time with her gives us a much deeper understanding of Subaru's present character and what he may one day be capable of. But of course, that's not a complete picture, not without factoring in his dad. Subaru might not be as athletic or charismatic as Kenichi, but he's still better built than most nerds and shares his father's odd but charming habit of striking dramatic poses for rhetorical effect. He's also got Kenichi's knack for improvising his way through new challenges by the skin of his teeth, though obviously some of the challenges in Lagunica cut it a little closer than that. And of course, he inherited that great head of hair, too. Subaru is half of each of them, and that's tough because who wouldn't want to be 100% Kenichi? Certainly, it makes sense when people keep telling Subaru, yep, you're definitely his kid, that he'd become acutely aware of all the ways in which he doesn't measure up. Though when he hears that from his neighbors, they're talking about his antics and achievements. When his mom says it at the end of the episode, triggering that old anxiety one last time, she's talking about his attitude. It's a response to Subaru claiming he doesn't deserve his friends and vowing to work on himself until he does. Which is the opposite of impressive on the surface, but perhaps that's the mindset that allowed his dad to become the perfect specimen of a man that he is today. Maybe it's even what helped him win Naoko's heart. We're not told a lot about their relationship besides their shared love of mayonnaise, so we've got to read between the lines we're given, and that is a very telling line. Subaru is a better person than he thinks he is. The Witch of Pride tells him as much before busting his ass up, and he may be closer to his own Natsuki Subaru brand of Natsuki Kenichi tier awesomeness than he realizes. There is one more major influence on Subaru's personality that we've yet to discuss: all that nerd shit he's into. The games, the manga, the light novels, especially the anime. And on the subject of anime, it's also worth noting that we're not the only ones peering in on these conversations. In a clever directorial touch, scenes in Subaru's room often open on an over-the-shoulder perspective shot behind one of the silver-haired waifu figurines on his shelf, subtly hinting that Echidna is watching him alongside us, feeding her voracious appetite for knowledge via psychic voyeurism. Those figurines also tell us pretty clearly that Subaru has a, type, a message that's reiterated by the choice of posters on his wall, which, put together, also tell us he has kinda shit taste. Or maybe broad taste would be a better term, because besides the Kadokawa-owned Asterisk War Absolute Duo and as yet unadapted The Detective Is Already Dead on his walls, his shelves are bedecked in back issues of Not Shonen Jump and other manga anthologies, a variety of tankobon and light novel collections, some waifu figurines with different hair colors, and even a few off-brand Initial D and Gunpla model kits. Even as a geeky shut-in, Subaru clearly takes after dear old dad, trying his hand at a wide range of different hobbies instead of focusing on just one. He's a true Renaissance otaku. Oh, and speaking of anime model kits, Yazzy's been doing Gunpla building and bedazzling streams as a VTuber, and they are just sublimely cozy. It's very calming and encouraging to get work done alongside her, and if you're looking for a chat full of building buddies to share your own kits with, you should definitely check out Ichigo Lemonade at the links where the links go. Now, back to the least chill otaku. It may seem odd to psychoanalyze a guy based on his anime shelves, but for young nerds, identity and interests are often inseparably intertwined, and ReZero itself seems to invite this examination. The first shot of this episode is a fisheye view of Subaru's shelf that harkens back to the first shot we ever saw of our hero in the new world of Lagunica. Or, maybe Masaharu Watanabe just really likes fisheye shots and I'm reading too much into it. But that's not the only reason to conclude that this room represents who Subaru is, or at least who he was, because it changes in accordance with how he does over the course of the episode. At first, it's the darkest, gloomiest part of the dream world, but once he works up the nerve to go to school, he opens the curtains and lets in the warm light from outside. A lot of anime protag rooms are just a repository of references to the author's influences, but not this one. Subaru doesn't even have any isekai stuff, yet collectively this collection suggests an inclination toward adventure, a boyish yearning for romance, and a general desire to escape from real-world responsibility and expectations. That same drive led him to become a goofy elementary school delinquent when his good grades and natural athletic abilities started to slip, and by the time he reached high school, to stop attending altogether, taking it a few increasingly frequent skip days at a time until eventually he was watching the clock, just waiting for an excuse to give up on going. Many ReZero fans in similar circumstances have commented on how close to home this episode hits, and that's no accident. From its inception, ReZero has explored the underlying psychology of the hikikomori phenomenon, but here it finally addresses the issue head-on. While Subaru's specific circumstances are driven by feelings of inadequacy relative to his awesome dad, the underlying emotions behind that are near universal. Many shut-ins and dropouts feel the pressure of outside expectations, real or imagined, and are slowly trapped by mounting shame over their perceived failure to meet them. In Japan, this is further exacerbated by very specific socioeconomic issues stemming from the lost decade. If you're not familiar with the subject, picture the job situation in post-2008 America, only it's worse, and it's been like that for 30 years. So Subaru's futile drive to be just like Kenichi could also be interpreted as an allegory for young Japanese people pursuing the same education and career tracks as their parents when those simply don't exist anymore. But I'm getting a bit into the weeds, and that's a topic that deserves a lot more research and its own extensive video. Let's get back to the sad nerd stuff. When you're dealing with that kind of pressure and shame, kindness and attempts at understanding from loved ones can feel suffocating rather than helpful. because those are the exact people you're letting down, and if they just give up on you, then at least you'd be able to stop hurting them and more easily give up on yourself. But the episode offers some sage advice, mostly through Naoko's mouth, on a more practical and less grim solution. Just try your best in your own way. See your role models and elders not as measuring sticks for your own growth, but as goals that you can aim for as you discover yourself. Cry when things are tough, as much as you need to. That's perfectly natural. But always keep pushing forward to a better ending where you can smile.
What matters isn't how you start or what happens in the middle. It's all in how it ends.
All wise axioms that pretty much anyone could benefit from, really, but they're exactly what I and a lot of ReZero fans needed to hear. That last one especially last year, though interestingly, Subaru doesn't interpret it that way at first.
Nothing else matters, just as long as everything turns out okay in the end.
Never one to give a straight answer, though, Naoko simply leaves him to ponder the true meaning of her statement as homework, perfectly in keeping with her gentle guidance style of parenting. Though interestingly, his wrong answer is also perfectly in keeping with the worldview of Naoko's character foil, Echidna. And now, at last, we get to the true brilliance of parent and child. Because as great as it is at fleshing out Subaru's past, this episode's most impressive narrative trick is the way it foreshadows his future and the two main villains he'll be facing in this arc. As he reminisces about his past, we learn about three core anxieties that still plague his present mind. A fear of being alone and misunderstood, which his mom assuages for now. A fear of failing to live up to his father's greatness, which he's reassured he doesn't need to do. And most importantly, a fear of letting down the people he cares about most. That last one, which is never truly resolved in this flashback, will drive him to horrific acts of self-sacrifice as the season goes on. As for the other two, well, as a mother figure, Echidna's a lot more actively involved in Subaru's life. She actually draws a direct parallel to Naoko at the very beginning of the next episode, saying she was watching Subaru closely the whole time. But she uses those observational powers to manipulate him instead of guiding him, to push him to do what she thinks is best. She's a meddler, a greedy narcissist, the polar opposite of...
Hey, we didn't have you because we wanted you to do something for us. We had you because we wanted to do something for you.
And she knows more about Subaru than even his own mother. You know, on account of the psychic voyeurism. She shares with him the one secret that he hasn't been able to tell anyone through countless time loops of suffering. That makes him trust her more deeply than he should, and when the other shoe drops, it hurts. Though not nearly as much as it would have hurt if he'd accepted her contract and allowed her to throw dead Subarus at problems to find perfect solutions. And also not quite as much as Roswaal's betrayal hurts. Hands off as he's appeared to be, the Harlequin sorcerer has offered Subaru quite a bit of guidance and help so far in his time in this new world. Weirded out as he is by the guy, Subaru looks up to him, respects him, and trusts him. So when he finds out that Roswaal's actually been a lot more involved with all the deadly threats he and Emilia have faced than he realized, specifically because he's causing most of them and conspiring to make the other ones exponentially worse, it's a lot to take in. And the reasoning behind it is even scarier, especially to Subaru. Roswaal sees a bit of himself in the young man, and he plans to use excessive trauma and violence to draw it out, turning Subaru into a selfish bastard who will use every power and person at his disposal to achieve his own ends instead of wasting his abilities saving others. And on that note, Roswaal's also now aware of Subaru's ability to time loop, though he doesn't know the specifics of how it works, and has factored that into his abuse, which is why Subaru has to spend this season speedrunning all of the problems he faced in previous arcs, plus a few new ones, simultaneously. But arguably the biggest threat, at least to Subaru's mental health, is the underlying drive behind it all. that Roswaal is threatening everyone he cares about and forcing him to follow in his footsteps. Subaru is not emotionally equipped to handle that kind of abusive, controlling relationship, at least not on his own, and if Roswaal gets his way, well, he's the polar opposite of Kenichi, so it would pull Subaru about as far from his ideal as he can get. Every other episode of Season 2 is absolutely incredible, but the emotional stakes set by parent and child make it all feel 10 times more engaging and impactful. And that's why I think it's the best, or at least most important, episode of the entire series so far. Director Masaharu Watanabe seems to agree, since his team pooled quite a few resources to make this one of the season's most impressive episodes, and probably cashed in a lot of chips with the network to make it one of the longest as well. This is an episode of broadcast television with no opening credits that leaves only 30 seconds for ads in its time slot. That's practically unheard of. You've got to believe absolutely in the power of an episode's storytelling and its importance to the overall narrative to even try to pull that off. It takes confident, decisive, creative vision, and that vision is equally evident in the artistry behind the episode itself. So the next time someone tells you that ReZero's nothing more than edgy, grimdark wish fulfillment fantasy, well, I've written several video essays that I hope can also change some minds, but you could try showing them this. Or From Zero. No sponsor today, but I wanted to let you know that until February 2nd, Bookwalker, Kadokawa's one-stop ebook shop, is running a promotion for That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime Season 2, where you can get 25% coin back on Volume 1 of the manga, light novel, or their spin-offs, 10% back on subsequent volumes, and a bonus illustration if you pre-order LN Volume 10. And if you want to sweeten those deals, you can use the promo code BASEMENT at checkout for an additional 600 yen off those books or anything else in Bookwalker's extensive catalog. Links in the doobly-doo. I'm Jeff Thu, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.